Thank you, everybody, for joining another episode of Intentwise Connect webinars. Today, I'm joined by Kenton Snyder at Intentwise, and we're going to talk about everything you've been afraid to ask about Amazon DSP. We're going to cover some of the basics and then get into some best practices on how to get started. So, today's speakers, myself, I'm the head of growth here at Intentwise. I have about 10 years of experience in Amazon ads, ranging from in-house working at brands to working at some of the biggest Amazon agencies. And I have been at Intentwise for a year and a half now, helping to run our educational marketing strategy, hosting events like these. And I'm looking forward to discussing today's topic with Kenton Snyder, who is our newest addition to the Intentwise, one of our newest additions to the Intentwise team. Kenton, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Ryan. So, like Ryan mentioned, my name is Kenson. I recently joined Intentwise as a customer success manager at the start of the year. My previous experience is on the agency side of things. So, spent the last year and a half prior to joining Intentwise in the Amazon space as well, managing customer accounts on both sponsored ads and DSP side of things for doing everything from strategy creation to account setups to optimizations and reporting. So really excited to kind of bring the full suite of things on the DSP side to the team today and help share with you guys some insights that I learned throughout my time there.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenton. And a quick note on Intentwise, if you don't know who we are, what we do, we are a software provider that helps brands and agencies that sell on Amazon and Walmart. We have three core software solutions that we offer. First is Intentwise Ad Optimizer, which is our retail-aware ad optimization platform that incorporates retail factors into your advertising management and allows you to make changes through robust UI with rules and AI-based bidding adjustments. We also have Intentwise Analytics Cloud, which is our comprehensive Amazon and e-commerce data store and pipeline. It allows you to connect to all of the main retail media APIs and download all of your reports automatically, connecting them together and building visualizations that are very easy to consume. And then most recently, we launched Intentwise Explore, which is a platform built on top of Amazon Marketing Cloud, or AMC. And that allows you to run queries, extract insights, and build audiences without the need of writing SQL on your own. And it's all done through our automated system with API connections to Amazon Marketing Cloud. So if you want to learn more about Intentwise or any of our solutions, feel free to visit our website or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to share. All right, with that out of the way, let's go over today's agenda. So we're going to review some of the basics about DSP, make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of what it is, how it works, how you get access to it. Then we'll start talking through some of the benefits and get into more specifically what are the targeting options available within DSP, some misconceptions that we have heard and come across from brands who are maybe hesitant to try DSP, cover some of the challenges you might have getting started, and then talk about what you need to do if you're interested in getting started with DSP. Now, before we jump right in order to help us tailor the content of today's presentation, we do have a quick poll question for the audience. We want to get an idea of everybody's current level of familiarity with DSP. So let me go ahead and launch this poll real quick. If you don't mind taking a second to answer this, this will help us determine how much time to spend on some of the basics before we move on. All right, yeah, everyone's pretty broad spectrum of responses here, Ken. It looks like we have maybe about 50% of our audience is currently spending on DSP, and the other 50% is not, but about a third of the audience who is not running DSP has in the past and has turned it off. So that should be interesting. Hopefully we can give you some good reasons to consider trying it again. Thank you to everybody who answered the poll. Go ahead and turn that off, and let's jump right in. So starting with DSP 101, one of the first things you're going to encounter when trying to start DSP is you need access to the platform, and this is called a DSP seat. There's a number of ways you can get access to DSP. You can run ads directly with Amazon. It's a managed service from Amazon that has a high minimum of spend. Usually you need to spend at least $50,000 to have Amazon manage the campaigns for you. Alternatively, you can work with an agency who has access to DSP, and they might have their own spend minimums, usually around $10,000 a month. Or you can work with two options for self-service DSP. The first is to work with an API partner, such as Intentwise, who has access to DSP, where you can manage your campaigns through our application, or you can get a self-serve seat from Amazon directly if you spend enough money. And again, they have a pretty high spend threshold there. It's even higher than their managed service Generally, to get your own access, your own seat to DSP, you would need to be spending over $100,000 a month for several months before they would consider that. So getting access is one thing that you need to be aware of. Second is that DSP ads can appear both on and off Amazon.com. There are a number of sponsored ads that also can share this property, but DSP ads have offer a lot more control over exactly where they do appear, and we'll get into that later. One of the biggest differences is that DSP ads are always charged on a CPM basis. If you don't know what CPM means, that stands for cost per million. And essentially you are billed a certain CPM, let's say it's $5 for every 1,000 impressions that your DSP ads receive. And then we'll get into some of this as a little bit later on as well, but when looking at DSP, ROAS and ACoS might not be the best KPI. That might make a lot of you grimace over there who are listening to me because you've heard this before, but there are real reasons why DSP needs to be looked at slightly differently than your sponsored ads, and we're going to break that down for you. And then lastly, DSP can be run with either Amazon-created audiences or advertiser-created audiences, and this is one of the main benefits to using DSP are the audiences that are available. All right, so let's cover a little bit more, strategically, where does DSP fit into the rest of your funnel? You may have seen this slide before, and I'll have Kenton explain, where we believe DSP fits in, but let me just quickly cover this marketing funnel graphic here. Basically, when you think about all of your campaigns, you have sponsored ads, maybe at the bottom of your funnel, which are capturing searches that are already happening from customers. So you're capturing that search demand that already exists. But what are you doing to refill that funnel with new customers and new people who haven't yet started searching? That's where DSP fits in a major way. And so Kenton, I'll let you, kind of cover the rest of the slide and how you see DSP fitting into the rest of the media mix.
Totally. So yeah, I think DSP can kind of be broken down into two separate segments. The first of which kind of being on the retargeting side, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, retargeting people who have already viewed your brand. And a lot of that's going to fall down on that purchase side of things or that loyalty side of things. It's going to be where you see a lot more of the ROAS or ACoS targets come into play. But I think even more importantly are some of those upper funnel campaigns when you're working with in-market audiences or lifestyle audiences. Those are going to fall a lot higher in the funnel, kind of focusing on those consideration phase shoppers. And that's where we're going to see, and we'll get into this more later as well, but that's where we're going to see that ACoS or ROAS might not be the right metric to look at, because the goal there isn't necessarily to drive the direct sales, and more to refill the funnel of shoppers who are actively looking to purchase from your brand. One thing we often see with retargeting is that you'll see drops in the amount of shoppers you're converting from your sponsored ad branded targeting or your organic sales, because maybe you have a little level of cannibalization within your retargeting to organic sales or sponsored ads. But what those awareness plays allow us to do is refill the pool that the retargeting shoppers are taking away. And while those retargeting shoppers are still driving sales, we're now driving a higher overall top line. We're expanding our audience pool, and we're driving those longer term sales. So that's where thinking and going into things like AMC and that type of reporting will be really beneficial, since we have, that last touch attribution model, which we'll get into a little bit more as well. But kind of fit into two different key places here. I think that's something we'll discuss a little bit more.
Definitely. So when you're looking at your overall media investment across all of the ad products that Amazon offers, whether that's your sponsored ads or DSP, realize that depending on what you're trying to do with that ad and whether you're at the bottom portion of this funnel and trying to convert customers through retargeting or even just through capturing search, or whether you're trying to refill that funnel, the goals for each of those campaigns should be different, and you need to evaluate their success differently. I'm going to pause right here. We do have a few questions already in the chat, Kenton. So looks like one of these questions is, what is the difference between in-market and lifestyle? You know what, actually, we're going to hold on that. We'll answer that in a second. We do break down the differences between all of the Amazon created audiences. So Constantine will answer that for you shortly. We have another question here from Nick Laus. It says, any insight into which goal for streaming TV has the highest impact on overall conversion as measured through pathway analysis and AMC? It's a good question. We will also cover some of this later on when we get to the targeting options. So stay tuned and we'll address those questions. Now that we've talked about where DSP fits in the overall marketing funnel, let's cover some examples of DSP ads. We have a few here on the right. Kenton, I think we've all been super familiar with the sponsored ads and what they look like on Amazon. Walk us through what DSP offers.
Totally. So DSP's ads are typically going to get broken down into two different segments. So we have display ads and video ads, both of which are going to kind of have two different goals depending on your placements and the type of ads. So starting with display, we kind of have two main functions there. So we have our static display ads, which are going to be your typical images. So we see that Arlo ad on the screen right now. That's going to be a good example of that. It's going to be a custom image that you're uploading and can run across different placements, both on and off of Amazon. Also within display ads, we have responsive e-commerce ads, which are those Jack and Jill ads you see on the screen. What's really interesting about these is that they are a good segment to kind of bridge the gap for people who may not have, or brands that may not have very built out custom assets or looking for additional conversion drivers. So with these responsive e-commerce ads within the platform, it's going to be as simple as uploading your ASIN, adding your brand name in a headline, and these ads will automatically generate across different sizing for you. And the responsive part of them is what makes them really great for conversion. So if you notice on these ads, we're bringing in Prime badging and star ratings and add to cart buttons based off of the information on your current product page. And this gets even taken a step further, and we'll bring in things like deals that you may be running to help really drive the conversion focus of your shoppers. So these are great both for those retargeting segments as well as people who may not have fully built out display assets. On the other side of things, we have video assets. So we have just a normal DSP video as well as streaming TV. Those normal DSP videos are going to play mostly off of Amazon, but still on like a desktop or a mobile type of platform while someone's searching around on different sites. These are going to kind of be custom assets that you upload, really similar to sponsored brand video. We want to keep in mind that maybe some of these videos won't autoplay or won't have sound enabled. And so a lot of the sponsored brand video assets that you've created to kind of have this product call out focus are going to be really relevant to these video placements as well. And in those placements, we're going to be moving a little higher up the funnel, focusing on product education, focusing on getting new shoppers. And I've seen those be really effective at driving traffic to the product page and then pushing people down the funnel to those static or responsive e-commerce creatives to drive the conversion. Finally, we have streaming TV assets, which are going to play on more connected TV inventory. So these are becoming more and more popular and having more and more inventory across different placements. So we have different things like Twitch and Amazon with the recent addition of ads to Prime Video. That's where streaming TV is going to come into an even bigger play as well. A lot more segments we can target going forward there. And then Amazon has a collection of third-party inventories that these streaming TV assets are going to play on, mostly through connected TV sources. So again, these are going to be assets that you're uploading, but are probably going to have some differences from those sponsored brand video or display videos that you're running because we're going to know that these are more commercial type videos. But Amazon does a great job of allowing us to build out more custom creatives here. So they'll have things like overlays where you can feature, your Prime badging, your star reviews, and images of your product for someone who wants to go navigate to it later while searching on their app or their desktop, as well as QR codes that we can overlay through the Amazon console on these streaming TV videos that someone can scan and go to either your product page, your brand store, your product off of Amazon to get more details about it and help us, track the attribution from someone who's maybe watching on a TV screen to going through and purchasing on their phone. So lots of cool things that Amazon's doing on the creative side of the house.
We're also noticing a significant investment from Amazon in expanding the inventory that's available for these ads, especially in streaming TV. If you've caught some of the recent press releases with Thursday Night Football, and like Ken mentioned, the addition of advertising to Prime TV video is now going to expand the available inventory to advertisers for that placement. We have a question, Kenton, about which performs better in terms of the static display advertising with lifestyle imagery, such as this Arlo ad we're seeing here, or one of the responsive e-commerce ads like the Jack and Jill. It's a good question because, while there's definitely benefits to branding some of your ads and including some of that familiar language to your customers that might recognize your imagery and your logo, the same is true with Amazon's logo and colors as well. And so that's definitely one benefit of responsive e-commerce ads. That yellow add to cart button, the Prime badge, that's all very familiar to somebody who's shopping on the internet and instills a sense of trust. So they have pros and cons to each. Ken, in your experience, does one typically perform better than the other?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your goals and the segments that you're targeting. If we're focusing on conversion, we're going after shoppers we know are aware of our brand, maybe through a retargeting campaign. I usually err on the side of a responsive e-commerce creative, knowing that like we see in that bottom Jack and Jill ad, we can still put on our own custom headline, bring in our logo to where it still has that custom aspect for our brand, but we are bringing in that direct add to cart button, the prime badging, which is going to give people confidence in making purchases. If the goal is more to drive awareness or consideration of our product, bring education around certain product features and target people who maybe we know have heard of our brand but are higher up in that shopping journey. That's where those display assets can come into play as we're giving a little more education around what makes our product unique. And so I think they're really best used in tandem, starting off showing someone those static display ads, and then for those shoppers that don't convert off of that, moving them down to those responsive e-commerce creatives, knowing that they now have that further education around our product.
Awesome. Another question here, Kenton. Some of these placements might be shared with sponsored display ads, which can be run through the Search Console, right? In terms of the size and the location on Amazon.com and even off Amazon.com. Is there any clear way to the user who's shopping to tell the difference between one that's a sponsored display ad and one that's a DSP ad?
Yeah, so they do show up in similar placements, mostly on Amazon. Off of Amazon, they have, and I've noticed pretty distinct differences. Um, on Amazon, you're going to notice, if it's a custom image, it's definitely probably going to err on more on the side of DSP. But there is slightly difference, some slight differences in the placements. If you're scrolling down a search result and see something on the side search bar, that's usually a DSP ad. Longer banner ads are usually DSP ads, and those sponsor display ads are usually more of those rectangular box-like that show towards the bottom of the page around the reviews or under the add to cart box. So they aren't too distinct from like a shopper's perspective. They're probably not going to realize that they're coming from different sources. But if you're going in and looking for them, there's definitely differences that you can tell, especially within the creative types and how the creatives are going to generate, and knowing where they're coming from if you're wanting to know how are your creatives serving across different pages.
Awesome. And there's definitely a lot of differences in terms of how they are operated. And we'll get into some of that. So moving on here to DSP targeting options. So, we talked about this at the beginning. There are two buckets, if you will, of audiences that you can target with DSP. There's the default Amazon created audiences, which are available to all DSP advertisers. And then there's custom advertiser created audiences, which you can build yourself, which is really cool. So let's start at the top and go through some of these options. First, you have in the Amazon created audiences in market. So this targets shoppers who are currently in aisle for products on Amazon. This is a dynamic audience. For example, let's say that you wanted to target shoppers who were looking for baby products for babies aged between 3 and 12 months old. That could be an in-market audience where Amazon has determined that based on other searches that these users are making and the products they're browsing, but not purchasing quite yet, that they're in aisle for that category. Next, you have demographic targeting. So unlike sponsored ads, DSP does offer a lot of demographic targeting, which allows you to focus down your audience based on age or income level or even geography where they live. And so you can get a lot more granular from that perspective. Lifestyle audiences, these are more broad, right? So they're going to be bigger on average than your in-market audiences. And they are shoppers who are determined to fit a certain lifestyle, such as travelers, frequent travelers, or sports fans. I've even seen lifestyle audiences like fans of Harry Potter. And so it really just depends on what Amazon has enough information on in order to group people together into a lifestyle or in-market audience based on those behaviors. And then lastly, here we have life events, and this one's pretty cool as well. This is a little creepy. If you don't like your data being shared, obviously it's not going to expose you individually, but this does allow Amazon allows you to target shoppers based on recent events in their life, such as if you've recently moved or are expecting a child, if you have kids in the home, if you don't. These are things that they are able to deduce either from information about your shopping behavior or information about your Amazon account, and they make it available to advertisers. So by default, Amazon's created audiences are extremely powerful. We'll get into some use cases of how these are actually implemented. But Kenton, do you want to cover some of the options beyond the default? What's available in terms of custom created audiences?
Totally. So we have a couple of options that we'll start with that are built out within the DSP platform that are super simple to build. So those are mostly going to be view and purchase audiences going off of people who have viewed or purchased specific products or product pages. And these can be both your products or competitor products. You could go off people who have viewed your brand store or people who have viewed past DSP advertisements. And what these are really going to allow you to do it kind of breaks down into two separate ways. So first, we'll have positively targeting these audiences. So we'll be able to go through and say, okay, I want to look at everyone who's viewed my product in the past and retarget them with a responsive e-commerce creative, for example, because I know these are high value shoppers that have a good chance of, purchasing from me. Or maybe I want to target people who have purchased from me in the past to drive a subscribe and save. Or if I want to bring it to competitor views, I could target people who review my competitor products. But this even gets taken a step farther and with some added value in creating audiences that we can use as negative targets. So we can say, when I'm running my in-market campaigns, I don't want to target anyone who's already viewed my product page because I want to make sure I'm driving new shoppers. Or when I'm targeting people who are retargeting, or maybe people who are I'm targeting competitor views, I can make sure I'm not targeting anyone that's already purchased from me or purchased from that competitor. So that I make sure that I'm driving those new to brand shoppers. I'm not wasting any spend here, and that I'm getting a full audience of people who are still in that shopping journey. So lots of cool things that we can do on that side of things. And then we can take this a step farther, and it gets a little more complicated when we can build in custom AMC audiences. So this is going to allow us to work with any data point that you can bring into AMC and kind of get a deeper level on some of these targeting. So we can target things like specific branded search terms. We could target people who are added to cart or added to lists, and so we can really get a little more expanded there and being a little more granular in our targeting both from a positive targeting and then negating the customers as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think one of the coolest things about these custom audiences is that, while there are some limitations which we'll cover, DSP does allow you to run ads and target people who have viewed your competitors' products or purchased them. So that's a pretty unique advantage that does not exist with other ad types. And of course, one theme you might notice here as we're talking about all of these different options is that nowhere in here is there specific keywords that we're trying to target. Obviously, this is all audience-based, so it's behaviors or actions or qualities about the shoppers that determine these audiences. We have a question here, Kenton. This is an interesting one. So they say they're newish to DSP and they have, do certain audiences act more like quote unquote auto campaigns versus manual campaigns, if that makes sense? Similar to sponsored display when looking at similar advertised products as you're targeting, which some in the industry say act like an auto campaign versus other types of SD targets. It's a good question. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I would say there is some slight differences. So maybe if I'm getting in some of those custom created audiences, like I'm looking at a view or purchase, that might work more on that manual targeting because I'm saying someone had to look at these specific ASINs, which is similar to if I put in specific ASINs in a sponsored display targeting. And I do have the option there to create a similar product views audience if I wanted to create an auto campaign. But I think the in markets or the lifestyles are kind of going to be a little more on that auto segment because I'm, just looking at shoppers who are in aisle for a certain category, but I'm not necessarily getting to specify which ASINs in that category I want to look at or any, additional customer segments within that. And then, from a bidding perspective, a lot of that's going to be automated, which we'll get into as well. But I'd say, those Amazon created audiences might compare more to an auto, while the custom audiences give you a little more control. But I'd say, in comparison to an auto sponsored display campaign, these Amazon created audiences are very curated. And so they're going to provide you, still a high level of performance when you're looking to use those.
Yeah. And one way that they would differ from an auto campaign is you're not able to like go in and pull out users that take certain actions like you would, in an auto campaign on search, you might be able to do that. Another question here before we move on from targeting, we don't have it on the slide necessarily, but obviously there are differences between how DSP ads are targeted versus how sponsored display ads are targeted, which if you don't know the difference, sponsored display can be run self-serve by anybody with a sponsored ads account. Ken, how would you decide between when should you run DSP versus running more sponsored display?
Yeah, I really think it depends on the budget you're wanting to push there. I think sponsored display can definitely hit a lot of the same points. You're going to have a lot of the same audiences available to you that you're going to have on DSP, but a lot of the differences are going to come in with how granular your targeting can get and how with the type of creative strategies you can build out, right? So on DSP, as we talked about, we have a lot more different creative types, and we can be a little more custom with the users that we're targeting and when we're using those creative types. And then we have the ability to stack these audiences or negate audiences. So if I wanted to say, someone has to be in market for this segment and also within, this income range, I can do that on DSP, but that's not something I could stack together on sponsored ads. So I think if you're on the lower budget side, maybe you're under, $5,000 a month that you're going to spend on display targeting, then sponsored display makes, a lot of sense, and can still give you access to some good data that Amazon's providing. But as you get into those higher spend levels and are wanting to build out a more targeted strategy, that's where DSP starts to make a lot of sense, especially if you have seen success with those sponsored display campaigns in the past.
Love it. Yep, DSP just offers you more control, more customization, amongst other things. So if that's your goal and you have the budget to support it, it makes sense to invest in DSP. What are some of the targeting limitations now that we've covered the targeting options? Kenton, you want to walk us through these?
For sure. So there's a couple of things that we'll run into when we're thinking about targeting. So we have frequency caps, which first, a frequency cap is just a lever that we'll be able to set on Amazon or on the DSP console that will say, on a daily or hourly limit, a certain customer or a certain user can only see my ad or this group of ads or this line item a certain amount of times. So maybe I don't want them to see it more than 2 times in an hour or 7 times in a day. I'll be able to set that limit within the DSP console. But what I won't be able to do natively in the DSP console is set that across a total number of views. So I'll be able to say, if they see it over any amount of days, they see it, 10 times, I won't be able to say, okay, now I don't want to show that to them anymore. That is something we can do with AMC, which we'll get into a little bit as well. But that's a slight limitation there. We won't be able to target shoppers who search specifically for certain branded terms. So we can't say, if they search for this exact brand term, I want to target them. We do have some things we can do natively in the console with, product searches, but we aren't able to define exactly what those terms are. Like we mentioned before, we would need AMC to target shoppers who added to cart or added to list, which we can't do natively in the console. You won't be able to target shoppers who have just never seen an ad from you before. So I wanted to make sure, okay, I'm only targeting shoppers who are completely new to me. I won't be able to say, okay, I don't want to include anyone who's seen any DSP or any sponsored ad before natively on the console. But again, that's where AMC could come in to help. And then the other 2 things we have are limitations on a custom audience creation side. So if we're wanting to target people who viewed our page more than 90 days ago, we won't be able to bring in those segments. Amazon caps that data at 90 days, and then purchases are capped at 365 days. You only be able to bring in the last year of purchasers when you're creating those audiences as well.
Yeah, and I'll just comment that I think while all of these are potentially solvable by adding AMC into your DSP strategy, this first one about setting frequency caps is especially important. We've noticed, especially if we've gotten more in the weeds with AMC, that there is a distinct drop-off point of purchase rates by ad exposure. So the more that you're exposing a certain user to ads constantly over and over again, the higher likelihood they are that that purchase rate continues to go down. And so your cost per acquisition in that bucket of users who have been exposed very frequently can be much, much higher than what it would be if you were able to set that total frequency cap. So there's one thing you take out of this to go check your existing DSP campaigns and run that query to see how total frequency of ads compares to cost per acquisition and purchase rate. Because we've seen time and time again that by not having this setting available within DSP, you're leaving yourself open to way overexposing some of your shoppers. All right, so let's get into some of the just clear benefits of Amazon's DSP. I think, one of the first major benefits that we've talked about is the expanded audience pools, right? So targeting options for shoppers who have engaged with your products or competitors' products, and much more comprehensive targeting options than sponsored ads, for example, by placement and device types. So in addition to picking the exact audience you want to target, DSP gives you extreme control over which size the ad should be, which format the ad should be, whether that's video, responsive e-commerce, or just dynamic e-commerce, as well as exactly which sites you want that ad to show up on. So you can target specific devices. For example, show this only in mobile applications on iPhones, Or you can say show it on mobile web, on all phones, show it on desktop web, show it on Amazon, off Amazon. You get the picture. You can also specify exact websites that you do or do not want to show up in that third-party exchange. So if you really don't want to show up on weather.com, you can prevent that from happening. Additionally, Amazon has advanced, obviously, Amazon data on customer purchase behaviors. If there's one company that probably knows the most about what we all like to buy and how we like to buy it, that would be Amazon. And so by being able to leverage their data in this DSP, we're benefiting significantly because Amazon is able to customize the ads and optimize the bidding to reach the right shopper at the right time with the right creative to hopefully incentivize them to make a purchase. Kenton, do you want to walk us through the last benefits here, especially the machine learning bidding algorithm and how that works?
Totally. So yeah, the machine learning bidding algorithm is really going to be what makes it easier to manage and optimize your DSP in comparison to like a sponsored ad or a sponsored display ad. So Amazon has built in, based off of different goals that we get to define in the DSP console, they have built in machine learning bidding, which is going to create different bids based off of the base bid and max bid that you enter into the console to bid on specific customer segments based off of their likelihood to purchase or click based off the goals you have set. And then as you get deeper into your performance, Amazon will automatically adjust your budgets between different line items and different inventory sources based off of where you're seeing the most success towards your goals. And so a lot of where you may have to make optimizations to different keyword bids or making top of search adjustments on the sponsored ad side of things, the things that kind of are similar in relation on the DSP side of things, Amazon has a pretty advanced algorithm that'll handle a lot of that for you. And then as we touched on before, we have those custom generated e-commerce creatives. So if you have a lack of creative generated that'd be good for DSP that you created internally, Amazon will allow you to build those out kind of natively in the console. So that's definitely a great benefit, especially for some smaller brands.
Yeah. And what's really cool about those, custom generated e-commerce creatives, and I'm not sure if we covered this in detail, but Amazon will also change the appearance of those ads based on who they're showing it to, which is pretty cool. So, for example, if I was a shopper on Amazon who always liked to read reviews before I bought an item, Amazon would know that. And one thing they might do when showing me one of these custom generated e-commerce creatives is put a review front and center and say, in the actual ad creative itself, here's a recent review that got 5 stars, check it out. If Kenton was always clipping coupons before buying something or was always interested in, buying something that was on sale, and Amazon had established that history, they would show him an ad with a coupon or a strike-through price to say, this is the right time for you. So there's hundreds of different combinations of ads that could be dynamically created at any given point in time, and that's the power of Amazon's machine learning at work.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a huge benefit and lots of different things that they're going to be able to do on the creative side. Some of the other things that we have is thinking about things on a CPM versus a CPC model. And this has different benefits depending on the targeting that you're doing. But one way I like to think about this is going after those, top of funnel in-market shoppers. So say, let's use headphones, for example, right? Say I have a wireless earbud brand and I'm really wanting to target shoppers who are just entering that shopping phase. I want to get in front of them early and drive, that education at the start of their shopping journey. So typically from a sponsored ad side, I might go after, say, the term wireless earbuds, which we know is going to be really competitive because there's lots of sellers for that on Amazon, which is probably going to drive my CPC up pretty high. So I'd have the same ability to target that similar segment of shoppers by going after an in-market audience for wireless earbuds on Amazon, which is going to be defined by those shopping habits that I would be going after on that keyword model. And since have a wider range of inventory available, I have a wider range of shoppers available because I'm not limited to those 5 top of search placements that I'd have on the sponsored ad side of things. We're typically going to see that our cost per click when going after those segments is going to be quite a bit lower because we have the CPM model. So instead of paying, $4 for that top of search click, I'm paying $7 for my CPM, right? Which if I can get even a 1% CTR on that or a 0.5% CTR, I'm getting a pretty high overall, 5 to 10 clicks from that, $7 that I'm spending versus the $4 that I got for that one click on search. So when I'm going after those shoppers, that CPM model can really come into play, especially as I start getting into things like video and being able to drive that additional education, whereas I may only have that one sponsored brand video placement that I'm limited to when targeting them directly in search. So, they can be a great complement for going after those search shoppers that are kind of entering the aisle.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, honestly, of how to think about DSP differently, especially the CPM model working to your favor. If you're in a high CPC category, DSP is another way to send traffic to your listings, which could possibly be much, much cheaper than bidding for those high cost per click keywords on top of search. And taking Kenton's example one step further, if you add AMC into the mix with custom audiences and AMC, you could also target people who are making specific keyword searches on Amazon. So one of the capabilities that AMC's audience builder has, and I know the differences between AMC audience builder and DSP audience builder are subtle, but they're big differences, which allow you to take the headphones example and build an audience of people who had searched for earbuds, wireless earbuds, or Bluetooth earbuds, any number of search terms that you'd like, and you could build an audience of those people and push that audience to DSP and target them that way. So many ways to potentially get around paying high CPCs if you're able to use DSP effectively, and if you're thinking about how it fits into your overall funnel. Let's see, we have a question here in the chat. I'm curious your thoughts on this, Kenton. So one of our viewers says their Amazon ads rep is trying to pitch them streaming TV on Prime Video and Twitch as a separate product. Is it worth the investment? What's your experience been with streaming TV?
Yeah, so I've definitely seen streaming TV drive a lot of incremental lift. So I actually had a brand that decided to test it this last Prime Day, this past July. With a moderate budget, I think you're going to probably want to be wanting to look at budgets at least starting at $20,000 for a month for streaming TV. It's definitely a higher level investment. We're going to want to make sure that we're having that higher level of spend so that we can see that marginal impact to our brand. Maybe slightly lower if you're a smaller sized brand, but generally that's going to be higher budgets that we're going to want to be wanting to start at. But I've definitely seen the impact of it. I think the key when you're looking at that is looking past the direct attributed metrics that we're going to see to that asset, right? Because streaming TV brings even more attribution issues, right? Maybe someone is watching something on Prime Video on a different account than they shop on their phone. And so they may have seen your ad and then purchased it, but that attribution might have gotten missed directly on the console. Or maybe they went and they clicked another ad because we know streaming TV, we're typically going after those top of funnel shoppers who may interact with another ad before they purchase. And now the sales getting attributed there. So really thinking about looking at things like AMC data, tracking our branded searches over time, looking at our top line glance views or product page views can be really key indicators of how the streaming TV performance is going. And I've seen some really strong performance with running, some good assets that focus on product education, include things like overlays and QR codes. Amazon's definitely putting a lot of emphasis there, and I think it's a great way to drive top line sales, especially around different events as we get closer to that season again.
Awesome. Kenton, from your experience, and if you can't answer this question, it's okay, but what would be the difference in CPMs between streaming TV and, for example, like a standard in-market campaign that you might run?
Yeah, you're going to expect it to be pretty significant, especially if you're going after those top, those higher value placements. I haven't had experience with Prime Video to know what CPM's there, but I'd guess it's even a little bit higher. From what I've seen from a regular video, I'd probably expect anywhere from an $8 to $10 CPM. And when I get into streaming TV, I'm probably expecting somewhere between a $21 to $24 CPM for most of the standard inventories that are provided. I would guess a couple of dollars higher for streaming TV. A lot of times what Amazon will do though is they will have different deals they run where they might give you guaranteed CPMs at lower rates. And so those are always good things to keep an eye out if you're looking to test streaming TV. But generally we're going to see it higher. But again, a lot of times there we're going after, higher value inventory. We're guaranteeing that, this is probably running like as a commercial and so while someone's watching some type of TV show on a streaming platform. And so the amount of people that we're getting that are probably viewing our ad and consuming it throughout the course of the content is going to be significantly higher than what we're going to see on a video just popping up on different websites, which still has great engagement rates and can still perform very well, but they kind of have different targetings there because those regular videos maybe want to make sure that they're already in the consideration funnel, they're in aisle versus those streaming TV videos. Maybe we're going after lifestyle audiences or life event audiences and trying to capture people before they start thinking about shopping for a certain product category.
Awesome. That's great advice. So to anybody who's considering streaming TV, I think one thing to keep in mind is it's clearly going to be more expensive than some of your other ads you might run through DSP, maybe 2 to 3 times the CPM. But especially as we know, Amazon is highly investing in this area, it might be possible to negotiate and work out a deal like Kent mentioned with guaranteed CPMs or something else along those lines. So don't hesitate to negotiate when talking to Amazon or reach out to a partner to help you with that. Before we move on, we got a lot of questions on this slide, so thank you. Let's take one more here. Can I use DSP for my website or just for my products listed on Amazon? It's a good one. Kenton, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so that's one of the great things about DSP is they'll allow you to send shoppers off-site. They actually encourage it. They want you to use DSP more, use their inventory more to send shoppers off of Amazon. And so if you have your own D2C site that you want to send shoppers to, there's some limitations that we're going to run into on a creative perspective. Like you're not going to be probably able to use the responsive e-commerce ads. Those are going to have to link to specific ASINs. But if you're using your own image assets, your own video assets, you're definitely able to send to your own website, which is great because in that way you get to use Amazon's data to send shoppers off of Amazon. So I can still get that shopping behavior data that may be difficult to get, especially as data security becomes more and more strict within other inventories.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to some DSP challenges, and then we'll answer some of these questions in the Q&A that are about challenges. So first challenge is, pretty simply getting access to DSP, right? Like we mentioned, there's a couple of ways to do this, and it's certainly gotten a lot easier over the years, but you still need to, in many cases, you need to work with somebody to get access to DSP, whether that's an agency partner, a tech partner like Intentwise, or Amazon themselves. It's rare that you will have the opportunity to get access yourself to DSP unless you are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars pretty consistently and have a team that's able to get in there and manage it yourself. Second would be probably learning the structure and nomenclature. It's very different from sponsored ads. For example, a sponsored ads campaign, you have campaigns, you have ad groups, you have targets. In DSP, those would be called orders and line items and ads. And so it's basically not comparable to sponsored ads. You have to learn it from scratch. And along the same lines, building new orders and line items can be very time consuming to do manually, particularly if you're not using the responsive e-commerce creatives and you're adding your own. It can be a process to make sure that you do it all correctly, that you've outlined your budgets and you're pacing them all correctly. So it can be time consuming to get started in that way. This is one where I'm going to defer to Kenton on specifics, but going back to the machine learning algorithm that DSP uses, it can make optimization tricky, right? Because you don't necessarily know which levers to pull to optimize your campaigns. Again, it's very different than sponsored ads where you're bidding up and down constantly. Maybe you're changing your budgets constantly, or you're just leaving your budgets open. The automated optimization that happens behind the scenes in DSP means that a lot of those controls you don't want to touch. You don't need to change your bid very often. So anything you want to add there, Kenton?
Yeah, I think, you definitely have the option when you're setting up DSP to turn those levers off if you want to have that automated control. I would always recommend leaving those automated recommendations on, having Amazon work through that. They have a lot of advanced data that they're getting on an individual user level that they're probably not directly sharing with us. And so they're going to be able to make really advanced optimizations in real time and do that with things like bids. We do have the ability to set parameters for the bids. Like I can say, this is my minimum bid and this is my max bid. And they'll stick within that range, but they're going to have some variance depending on the users and the time of day within that segment. If you have multiple creatives involved, Amazon's going to optimize within those creatives. If you have lots of inventory sources selected, Amazon's going to optimize within those inventories. They'll optimize budget between different line items. And so really where we have the ability to go in and change things is in a couple different levers. So we have that bid lever where we can pull and say, okay, maybe I'm overspending. I can bring down my max bid. Or we have frequency caps, like we talked about earlier. I can lower my frequency cap if I'm maybe seeing I'm overexposing to certain users. I could bring that down because Amazon's going to try to spend through your budget. So if you have a smaller audience size, maybe they start overexposing and leaning past that optimization because of the budget you have set. So that's always something to keep an eye on. And then there's other things like potentially looking at my creatives or my inventories or my audiences and getting down into the individual performance between each of those. But the beauty of that is it's not something that I'm needing to go in and check on a twice a week basis to see how is the performance trending because Amazon has those automated levers. And it can be more something that I go in and review maybe every 2 weeks or every month and see, okay, how is my performance trended? Do I need to make any changes to the inventories I'm targeting? Do I need to add or take away any specific audiences? And Amazon provides us lots of data when we're doing that to make those optimizations. But the great thing is it's going to be a lot more hands-off than you might have on the sponsored ad side of things.
Definitely. And the levers that you are pulling are going to be very different. So thank you for that. That can definitely be tricky when you're getting started. You know, the next one here, we've gotten a few questions in the chat about this. So let's maybe double click on this. Properly measuring sales attribution can be difficult because of the last touch model. And you know, this is a common pain point with DSP and actually with Amazon ads in general. Before we get into some of the other questions asked about the sales attribution and how it works, I will say that this is where AMC really shines. If you've heard us talk about AMC before, we've been really diving into the platform. AMC at its simplest is the tool to really measure attribution across all Amazon ads products. And so it really helps with this specific problem. Now, Kenton, some specific questions we got in the chat. Mauricio says, currently in the Amazon advertising console, there's an attribution when it comes to sponsored display campaigns, which are being operated on a VCPM model. Sometimes the attributed sales do not belong to us, but the system attributes it to us. Do we have the same issue within DSP where attribution is based on views, not on clicks?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. So view attribution is definitely involved. However, a click attribution is going to override a view attribution, which is similar to how it runs on sponsored ads, right? So if I'm running different DSP ads and all someone does is view them and then they purchase from me, then it's going to get attributed to that last product view. Versus if they click a certain ad, say they click an ad and they view two more, it's going to get attributed to the one they clicked. The beauty with DSP is we do have the ability to define what products are counting towards our attribution. So there'll be something when you're setting up your DSP campaigns that'll be called featured products. And anything you list in your featured product section are going to be only products that are tracked towards your ROAS and your sales numbers natively within the console. And DSP does offer a total sales and a total ROAS, which are going to bring in all of your product category and track the sales and ROAS from a brand halo perspective, similar to what you're probably seeing on sponsored ads or sponsored display. But the great thing is we are able to get a further breakdown into it if we're focused on specific product groups and the effect on sales that it's having there.
Yeah, that's nice that you can upload in DSP, you can upload specific ASINs that you want to be tracked and then attach them to a specific order in DSP. So in terms of attribution, it will only track if those ASINs were purchased or viewed, etc. We have another question. Let's see. Could you please reiterate the rules on frequency caps? What are the limitations with setting them? Sure. So with DSP frequency caps, natively within DSP, you can set a cap so that a specific user doesn't see an ad more than X number of times per hour or per day. But what you can't do is say, don't show a specific user more than X number of ads total ever, without any sort of time filter on that. So for example, if you set your frequency cap at 7 times a day, that same user could be exposed 7 times every day. And for the history of time, so over a year, you've now exposed them 21,000 times to your ads. So in order to expose or remove people who have been exposed that many times or any number of times permanently, you would need to create an AMC audience of people that have been have been shown an ad X number of times, and then you would exclude that AMC audience from your DSP campaigns to get around that.
And the other great thing that AMC will add is we're able to bring in sponsored ads data to that as well. So I can say, maybe they viewed a DSP ad 4 times and they viewed a sponsored ad 5 times. And so they viewed it a total of 9 times. Maybe that's my cap. And so just natively in DSP, we wouldn't be able to bring in that sponsored ads data as well. And it would just see it as those 4 views.
Awesome. All right, one more question and then we'll move on here. So for video, this is a good one. I don't know the answer to this. Maybe Kenton does. Is there something similar to the new sponsored brand video, which is like those vertical video formats? And does it tie in at all? Does DSP tie in at all with Amazon's Inspire influencer program, to your knowledge?
Yeah. On the new sponsored brand video, not that I'm aware of. It's going to be based off of Amazon's inventory. It's a pretty standard video size in that normal horizontal video. And so it's going to be placed around different, sites and different platforms. It would not surprise me if Amazon added that inventory for a vertical video. I think it just gets a little more complicated because they're working with a lot of third-party providers and third-party sources that are going to have to build in that ad placement type into their platforms as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's available in the future, but as far as I'm aware, that's not currently available. And on the Inspire program, I don't believe there's any direct attribution into it, but if you were to get into, say, using attribution links or things like that, you could work that into your click-through URLs if you wanted to get more advanced tracking on where certain users are coming from. However, you could, I guess, go a step further and use, any content that your creators that you have on the Amazon console are using, or feature those creators in your assets. But it's not going to directly attribute, and the source of these shoppers are probably going to be coming from different places, as your, influencer create or audiences are probably coming from people who directly saw the ad, or product with in those influencers, while DSP are probably going to be people who are more natively finding the product while shopping around on different sites.
Awesome. And just real quick before we move on here, we are getting close to the end of today's webinar. So if you have questions that have not been answered or you just didn't have time to ask them, feel free to email ryan@intentwise.com and I'd be happy to get back to you as soon as possible. So last challenge here is, since DSP does offer such a large audience pool, it can be difficult to know which audiences to utilize. This is actually a really interesting point because a lot of the in-market audiences are very interesting and they could be relevant to your product, but depending on your budget, you're going to have to be very selective on who you decide to target. And Ken, in your experience, like how many audiences does it make sense to include in a specific product?
Yeah, I think it varies on, what your targeting is. If I'm just saying, hey, I want to do, retargeting and I want to do some basic in-market audiences, I'm probably not including more than, the one retargeting segment. I'm looking at my specific ASIN views, and then probably not more than, 2 in-market audiences that I'm including, at least to start with, just as we collect that data. And then Amazon's going to provide us an overlap report that we'll be able to generate, showing us how we're comparing against all the different segments that they offer across the platform. So once we start collecting data, we can go through and review that report and say, okay, how am I comparing in certain demographics, even if I'm not directly targeting those, or other lifestyle audiences? And that's where I can start to get a little more in depth with my targeting and bringing in those audiences once I know how I'm typically tracking against them, even without targeting them directly.
Awesome. All right, so let's skip to our last slide here. And somebody asked a question in the chat as well. What would you recommend as a starting process for Amazon DSP if you wanted to focus on getting detail page views? So Kenton, hold on to that one. I'll let you respond. Here are our recommendations in general for getting started with DSP. First would be to evaluate your target audiences. This could be the demographic, interest-based, or in-market segments that we discussed previously. Really importantly, make a plan for how DSP, sponsored ads, and organic traffic will work together to ensure you're creating incremental dollars for your business, and create a strategy to collect data across all of these channels. This is important, as we've discussed and as the questions have indicated. There's lots of concerns with tracking attribution of DSP, and if that's one reason why you turned it off in the past, or maybe haven't gotten started yet, it's important to really consider how you're going to get those answers and what answers you need to find before beginning with DSP. So find a way to get that data, find a way to analyze that data. AMC is a great tool in that regard. And then lastly, build your creative and placement strategy. Will you use video ads or just display? Do you have streaming TV quality video ads or just regular display video ads? Do you want to target shoppers when they're on Amazon, when they're off Amazon, or just, et cetera, et cetera. So putting together your plan in this regard will help you, if we go back to that marketing funnel that we started with, will help you figure out what the goals of each of your DSP campaigns should be, and whether you should be evaluating them based on ROAS, detailed page view rate, CPM, or something else. So with that being said, Kenton, what would you recommend for somebody who's just getting started on DSP and wants to focus on getting detailed page views while maintaining profitability?
Yeah. So I mean, for a focus on detail page views, I would really hone in on in-market audiences. I think that's a great place to start, like we've mentioned a couple of times. You're able, you know what aisle your product is in, right? You know that, okay, if I'm selling, again, wireless headphones, there's specific segments that can get down to that niche. And so I know those shoppers are relevant and actively looking for my product groups. And so they're gonna have interest in the product I'm showing them. And so I would either use display ads or video ads, depending on what level of education you're going to drive. If you're a higher priced product for your category, I typically err on the side of video so I can have a little more education. And then display is probably going to be a little bit cheaper CPM. So depending on what your preferences are there. But then the key there is going to be, like Ryan was mentioning, having that track to see how is the performance trending when I'm placing with those audiences, because you are likely going to see that the directly attributed ROAS is going to be low when you're targeting those in-market segments, because they aren't probably previously aware of your brand. And so really what you're going to need to do there is say, okay, I'm going to track my branded searches. How are they increasing? And I can get an idea of how that changes relatively. Maybe I'm tracking my top line sales. If this is the biggest change I'm making at this time, I can see how that affects my top line sales, or I can use AMC to kind of get a direct idea into, okay, how many people are viewing this ad? And then eventually, no matter how many other ads I see, how they move through the funnel, how are they leading to purchases? And so there's definitely ways we can get in and attribute those sales while driving those detail page views as a focus.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everybody who joined today. We are right at our 1 hour mark. Thank you, Kenton, for sharing all of your advice and answering all these questions today. As you leave the webinar, you will be asked to complete a very short survey. Please just give us a few minutes of your time and fill that out. It really does help us curate content that would be helpful for you in the future. So if you enjoyed today's session or not, please give us that feedback. And we are hosting another DSP webinar in a few weeks. We will send out emails to let you guys know, but we're going to dive much deeper into our best practices at Intentwise, share some learnings and some data with you. So if you found this session helpful but want to get a little bit deeper, don't hesitate to join us for the next one. You can register for our newsletter and be the first to find out about it. So thank you to everybody who joined today. We will send the recording out early next week and hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Thanks, Kenton.
All right, thanks everyone.